Today, I'm talking with Dr. Roberto Sussman, who will be speaking at the Global Forum on Nicotine in June this year. A full-time senior researcher and lecturer in physics at the National University of Mexico, Roberto specializes in theoretical cosmology, but he's also the founder and director of Pro Vapeo Mexico, an association representing Mexican consumers of non-combustible nicotine products. He's actively advocating for appropriate regulation of tobacco harm reduction products in Mexico. So thank you very much for talking to me, Roberto. It's nice to meet you. I guess, firstly, because of some of your research that we're aware of, my first question would be to ask you what you can tell us about misinformation in peer-reviewed research on second-hand vapor. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the first important thing is that well, I do have a very good background in thermodynamics and properties of gases and aerosols, though it's not my main specialty. But I've been reviewing the literature on environmental vapor. It is evident that it is very extremely unlikely that research, that's analytic chemistry, the research on the emissions, the environmental emissions from vaping, that they are going to find anything. Right. The reason is very simple. Most of the vapor, we call it vapor, really it's an aerosol. About 90% or more of the aerosol that vapors inhale stays in the body. It's absorbed. So what is released outside by the vapor, it is extremely diluted, and it is composed of volatile compounds, and the droplets, the so-called particles, it evaporates very quickly. So it's what we can say is that as a pollutant, it is extremely weak. So the literature, I've been looking at the literature, it does reflect that. See, authors do not find anything. There are maybe one or two papers that are really, really, really rubbish that have claimed to found something. I can judge them. I know the experiments. I know the physics of this stuff. Yeah. So, and I also know the chemistry. Sure. So, except for a few ones that have shown something that you can really throw them away. There is nothing that has been found that is harmful in appreciable quantities, because the coffee you drink in the morning has toxic compounds, but the matter is the dose, how much you are exposed to it. And there is nothing, to worry, absolutely nothing to worry in environmental vapor. Okay. So, however, almost every article that you read, not all of them, but let's say, I don't know, now 80–90% of them, when you read the recommendations, when you read the conclusions of the articles, you are frightened. Say, this can be dangerous for.
When you say articles, do you mean scientific articles or mass media articles?
No. I'm talking about scientific articles.
Interesting. Okay.
The scientific articles, not the press releases.
Yeah.
No. The scientific articles, they have a lot of them. I would say the majority. There's nothing to worry that they found. Yet the conclusions is, this is pollution, secondhand vaping, particles. Worry about that, and also sometimes even in the introduction, because you have to bear in mind that most people will never read the article. Most people will stick with the front end of the article, which is the title, the article, the abstract. Perhaps some bits of the introduction, and then you go right away to conclusions. And then many of these authors even dare to issue policy recommendations like vaping has to be forbidden indoors because it can be dangerous. It's an extremely precautionary act, and this is extremely worrying. This is something I would like to report just to end the question, since aerosols have two parts: the so-called particle part and suspended particles in quotation marks here, I have to say, because well, the particles and the gas phase. See, the particles in the aerosol here are droplets, are liquid droplets made of propylene glycol, glycerin, some humectants. So to call them particles is already going too far. Particles. And to think that these are dangerous, it's a dishonest attempt to equate them with the suspended particles of air pollution. Or suspended solid particles of air pollution. Tobacco smoke is also an aerosol whose particles are solid, and these particles, they pose dangers. So I can explain why they can. It's a very detailed explanation. There are reasons. There's epidemiology, etc. And then this is a dishonest attempt to equate the droplets, which you technically call particles. Okay. Suspended particle with this suspended particles of air pollution, tobacco smoke, and this you find in most papers.
Right. Okay.
Some of them do not even distinguish; they just call them particles.
Okay.
Some of them even mention that they're droplets, yet in the conclusion they say they are dangerous, that you are exposed, etc.
That's very interesting, and I mean, it's clear that you're looking at this with a scientific viewpoint that is not always accessible to many of us. So it's a very interesting viewpoint to have. Thank you. I guess I might move us to asking you, as founder and director of Pro Vapeo Mexico, how do you go about countering misinformation about safer nicotine products? What methods do you use, and what do you find most effective? Because if we're talking misinformation, then how do you manage that?
Well, it's difficult because it's easy and it's difficult. See, Latin America is like the Wild West of regulation with respect to this type of products, because this nicotine delivery, electronic, without combustion, basically it's vaping. Here, oral tobacco it's almost unknown. It's known, but it's very, usage is very, 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 very small. We almost don't have it. So it's very it's a Wild West, because in rich countries like in Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, well, Australia the exception, but it is regulated already. It is available. There is misinformation, but there are more users. You can go to a 7-Eleven in any place in the US and you can buy your electronic cigarettes. Still, we still don't know what the crazy FDA will do, but in England, in France, Germany, okay, that's the situation, and perhaps even in Japan or Korea. I'm not aware there, but in countries like Mexico or in the rest of Latin America, it is very nobody will tell you anything if you are vaping in the street.
Okay.
Right? It's completely legal.
Right.
Nobody will know if you bring your own vaping stuff when you are traveling. Custom agents will not take it from you. Will not decommiss it. Right.
Yeah.
Now, however, if you want to buy them, then it can be difficult because marketing and sale it's illegal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now, what does it mean that it's illegal? Something illegal in Latin America is not the same as something illegal in England or in Germany or in the US or Canada. Because here the law is not enforced. Well, it is enforced, but in a very lax way. It depends on the product. And in the case of electronic cigarettes, vaping, in Mexico, if you land in Mexico, you wouldn't notice that it's illegal because it's everywhere.
Right.
Well, it's not everywhere, but it's in a lot of, and it's sold and bought and sold. It's not everywhere. It's still a fragmentary distribution,
sure,
but it's available. So also that means that people are aware of the product, but are not as aware as they are in the Western, in the rich countries. And so the basic battle now, who are emitting this information? Partly is government.
Yeah.
Government institutions or health institutions, which are very tied to the WHO. And most of these bureaucrats, health bureaucrats, to different ways, they have ties with the WHO. The WHO can function as a golden retirement for many of them. And so they are very, this is one set, the bureaucracy, and the other one are some private NGOs. They are connected with Bloomberg, with Bloomberg Foundation, and also with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. And they are small but very, very aggressive.
Sure.
And so we have this information from these two sources. Typically, they publish media issues which are clones. It's so evident that they are lobbyists. They're not communities. They present themselves, the private ones, as communities, but they are really lobbyists. And then the government, and then there is a synergic relation between them and the government. So how do we counter them? Well, we answer back the media, and we try to mobilize the community, because this is our strength. Our strength is that we are a community, and we cannot be pinned down as part of the industry. That's another actor, the industry. But the industry, we talk to the industry also, but we are not really working with them, but we're in communication with them. So a lot, they try to, the misinformation is trying to make vaping, the whole of vaping, as some sort of conspiracy by the tobacco industry to hook kids into addiction. This is a very typical Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids thing that they're to implement. But they're not. Look, what happens is that anti-vaping media has been successful in places where there is a lot of hostility to smokers. Why? Because for us in the GFN, we know that vaping is completely different from smoking. But the average Joe, the average person, doesn't see it so differently because they don't know. The non-smoker, think about the non-smoker, the common non-smoker that has been hearing for decades that smoking is so bad and so on, with some justification, but a lot of exaggeration also. And with justification, I'm saying smoking is bad, but the way it is presented, it's really, it's like plutonium, you know? Now, in places where smoking has been extremely denormalized, it is very difficult that vaping will not have some of these stones thrown into it.
Of course.
Now, what happens in Latin America? Smoking is not so denormalized. Okay?
Yeah.
So vaping, as a consequence, is also more accepted. Even if many people will say, well, it's some sort of mild form of smoking, because smoking is not so much hated, not so much normalized. So vaping is also not so denormalized. So this means that it is harder for this for these campaigns to attack vaping.
Sure.
But the way their strategy is to pin it with smoking, with conspiracy from tobacco companies, and also to it's a goal they have to further denormalize smoking in Latin America. I'm not saying that smoking is acceptable in Latin America. It's not so hateful as happened, right? So our campaign is and also we have been contacting people in the ruling, the legislators and medics, doctors don't want to talk to us, and if they talk to us and they agree, there are many doctors that agree with us, many physicians, but they will not move a finger publicly because medicine as a profession is very vertical. It is very difficult for one doctor to go against the stream.
To go against the grain, yeah.
So, but legislators are more open. Some legislators have been opening, and that's what we are trying to do: talk to them, bring our message, and we want to have a national debate. A debate that is moderated. It's not only a debate because doctors tell me, yes, a debate. You are going to debate only doctors. And not even you, because you are not a doctor, you're a physicist. I tell them, look, this is interdisciplinary. You might know a lot of medicine, but you don't know the chemistry and the physics of these things. I know them. I can teach you that. I say, no, it's only doctors here, only doctors. But we know that if it is only doctors, then the mainstream, which is extremely, in Mexico, extremely influenced by the WHO, and it's that doctors here, it's not that they hate vaping, they're basically ignorant. It's a mixture of ignorance, fear, and ideology. Right?
Which I think is again the same in a lot of countries.
Exactly. But the advantage, as I was telling you here in Latin America, law is not enforced very strictly. People are more tolerant of something that looks like smoking. And also, another factor that is important in Latin America is people do not trust institutions.
Yes, that's interesting.
For example, if you're in Scandinavia, I mentioned Sweden, concretely Sweden, people trust public health in Sweden because, the standard of public health in Sweden is fantastic. It's one of the highest in the world. So people trust it. So what happens when public health Sweden is lying about snus? People trust it.
People trust it.
It is a paradigm like saying if the angels are lying. Let me phrase it like this: if the devil is telling you the truth, but the angels are lying, who do you believe? Right? So in Sweden, in Europe, in the US, people trust health authorities. So if they lie, they believe the lies. In Latin America, when public health, people perhaps will trust public health a little bit more than other government bodies, just a little bit more.
It's marginal. Okay.
If you tell people in Mexico, look, public health, nationalists of public health is lying, they believe it.
They believe it. Okay.
They will not believe you. Mexico and Argentina, in Colombia, Brazil, they believe you. So that plays to our advantage. That institutions can often lie. So now vaping is booming. And why it's booming? Because it's fun. Because people like this idea that it's a way of doing your little scene, but without harming your body.
So do you have a thriving culture of vapers in Mexico that you are working with? Do you have a strong community? You mentioned community a few minutes ago.
Yes, there is a thriving community, and not well organized. We try to be the information and the scientific and political voice of this community, and we are respected. We are very respected, but the groups among themselves, they are always quarreling and so on. But yes, we do have a vaping community. Of course, We think that there in Mexico about close to 1 million users.
Okay.
It's an exponential growth.
Yeah.
Because the product, people, and it's growing because people like the product, because smokers like it.
Yes.
And they don't trust. You know, there's public health doctor or person from public health or saying dangerous, toxic, addiction, blah blah blah. But people know that these guys are they're not angels. People know these guys are not angels. They enjoy the product and they buy it, and it's booming. You can see it. But most of the people that is using it are not really connected to the community. They are simply using it. Not following us. In forums, right?
And where are people buying from? Where are the vendors?
You can. It's very easy to buy from internet, internet sale, and you have, I would say, on the hundreds of vendors by internet, and they're reliable. And then there are about 30, 40 physical stores in Mexico City. Now, this type, I'm describing you one market that is, it's perhaps close to 1 million people, or no, maybe less, maybe let's say 500,000. I would say 50% of the frequent users, of the regular users. It's middle class and upper middle class. And the vendors are exerting self-regulation. Because there's no regulation, it's illegal. There's no regulation, but they exert self-regulation. And then there is this other 50% that are lower middle class and lower class. They buy cheap products, closed systems, old systems that are discarded already, but they're still on sale in Mexico. And this it's a worrying situation, because these people, they get the liquids and the equipment. It's low quality, and there is no. It's a market that is it's very difficult to know about it, and it might be it's something to worry, because now I would like to mention
good regulation in Mexico.
Perhaps a good question, if you have not thought of it. It's what are the plans of the authorities for regulation? Are they planning to regulate it or not?
That's an excellent question, Roberto. Why don't you ask yourself?
I'm asking myself. So what are the authorities going to do? Now, here I'm going to talk more specifically about Mexico, but what I'm going to say, it is very similar to other Latin American countries, but it's not identical, I must say. There are some every country has unique features. Most repressive now is Brazil, because of the new president, who is waging a campaign against vice, etc. But Mexico and Colombia perhaps are the more liberal. But what is happening? The authorities and the anti-vaping groups, even the most extreme ones, they want the products to be legal. Right? There is nobody wants to do something like Hong Kong or Thailand or Saudi Arabia. That is to be illegal, and they're going to be forbidden. Everybody wants to make them legal. They want to regulate them. Everybody. And even us as a community and as vapers, we also want it to be legal. We don't want it to be illegal. You might hear some crazy vaping groups that are saying, no, we are fine, don't make it legal, blah, blah, blah. But they don't know what they're talking about, because the situation we have now, this semi-legality, this gray market, is very unstable. Very unstable. So it has to be, you have to put some legal framework. So now the issue is, how are you going to regulate it? It's not the issue in the region is not whether it is going to be regulated or not. The issue is how it is going to be regulated. Now, if you talk to the anti-vaping crowd, either government or the private ones,
Yeah.
they say, yeah, of course, it is smoking. Has to be
Yeah.
regulated. It is just a form of smoking.
Sure.
They say it's toxic. They are always saying that it's toxic, and they are always saying that it's addictive, and they always bring the children and the young people thing. It
Yeah.
is like everywhere in the world. And so this means people has to be protected from this, just as we protect society from the ills of smoking.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be protected. This has to be put in the same category as smoking, and with all the restrictions. Exactly. They say we want to regulate it like that.
Yeah.
Most of these people are MDs. An MD typically is extremely ignorant of economic issues, of taxing,
Mm-hmm.
and these issues of regulating. They are in their throne, and they deliver this thunder, and then they think the whole thing is solved.
Sure.
But they don't realize that what they are saying is total nonsense, because the legislators understand that this is going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
Because legislators are lawyers, are economists,
Yeah.
are politicians. They know that regulating something it is difficult, and
Yeah.
you have to look at the properties of that something. Now the argument, and this is probably valid in not only in Latin America, is that these MDs, they say, well, this is something that is delivering nicotine, therefore it is like smoking. End of story. But they are talking about the functionality. You tell them, well, there is no tobacco here. It's not a tobacco. No. It's delivering nicotine. Therefore, it is like smoking. End of story.
Yeah.
Full stop. Now,
Yeah.
there is some reason in that, because they are identifying a functionality, right? But functionality is not everything. Like, for example, if you take a carriage that is dragged by horses, horse carriage,
Yeah.
it's transporting people.
Yeah.
Okay, now a car is also transporting people, or a plane or a train, they're transporting people also.
Yeah.
So there is a similar functionality, but nobody would regulate horse carriages, cars, and airplanes and trains under the same framework. It would
Yeah.
be a nightmare, right? The doctors don't care. They just usher, they just throw their bolt, and then they go to their Olympus. But everybody else knows that that's not true, and this is the battle we're saying. We're
Sure.
telling them it is impossible to regulate a product that has electronic components, that has a different, it's a completely different economy, it's a different product. You cannot regulate it with traditional products. You have to establish a different category.
Yeah.
And then we also emphasize the issue of the risks.
Yeah.
You have to regulate in proportion to the risks. And here we go to a full circle with environmental vapor.
Yes. Sure.
Because the regulation of tobacco, of smoking, is so special because it is protective of third parties.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is the main reason why cigarette smoking and smoking in general is regulated in such harsh ways,
Yeah.
because of secondhand smoke, because
Yeah.
you protect people from secondhand smoke, right? That's the justification. So they want to extend, in order to extend the issue that vaping is like smoking, they have to convince people that there is something like secondhand vapor that is equivalent to secondhand smoke. And so, but it is not equivalent,
Yeah.
right? This is why the issue of secondhand vapor is so important.
It's so pertinent. Yeah.
You have to tell everybody, society,
Yeah.
smokers, vapors, MDs, everybody, that it is not true.
Sure.
That you cannot regulate vaping like smoking, because you don't have to with vaping you don't have to protect people from
the vapor. Yeah.
I'm not saying that, if you are in a vaping convention and there's lots of people vaping, it will be irritant and bothering for people not used to that. Not dangerous. You're not going to get sick from that, but it's going to be very irritant. So vaping indoors has to be regulated.
Yeah.
The theater, you cannot throw clouds, whatever,
Sure.
in a library, whatever. But it has to be regulated, and but not forbidden, not a blanket ban like smoking. It's not applicable. And this is a struggle we're fighting in Latin America, trying to convince legislators of this case. And it's a global fight also.
Yeah.
It is a global fight that it's very important because look, if vaping is an alternative to smoking, right? But it is very important that the smoker is stigmatized, good or bad, whatever, it's a reality, stigmatized, right? So if that smoker can switch to become a vapor and will still remain stigmatized, so what's the point? You know, the switch from smoking to vaping takes a learning curve.
Yeah.
So it has to be some carrots, right?
Yeah.
Some rewards there.
A positive outcome.
Because you will still be stigmatized and you will still be accused of being a walking source of pollution that is poisoning children. So what's the use of making the switch, of taking all this learned? So I'll keep smoking. And this is the unintended consequence that we have to worry about.
Roberto, thank you. You have given us a really good overview and a really good insight into what's happening in Mexico and what's happening in Latin America, and also some really interesting perspectives on why secondhand vapor is so such an important issue when it comes to the entirety of regulation around non-combustible nicotine products. So it's really interesting. I'm going to ask you my last question, which is simply to say, what do you hope to get from GFN this year? What are you looking forward to doing the most in Warsaw?
Well, you know, like we say that congresses are like the cattle people in the North America and South America. It's many countries have a cattle culture, right? So it's like a cattle fair.
Yeah.
Right? You are really meeting other cattle growers and other agriculturals. You are talking about your fields and you are getting new ideas. And you are looking at the growth of or the cows from this guy from another country, say, oh, your cows look very well. So how did you keep them? And then he will tell you, and it's an exchange of information, right?
Yeah.
And essentially, the benefit I've got from the GFN is exchange of information, learning things. And it's not so much from the lectures themselves, because those you can always get them. They're recorded and so on. But it's the exchange of information with other participants. And knowing that your problems are common with other problems, other people's problems. And I think some very, very well prepared and articulate people, and also reinforcing the fact that we're a global community as well. It's a global community with many actors. That's another very interesting thing that I like about the GFN, is that industry is invited. Industry is an actor. It cannot be marginalized all the time. Has to be invited. We have to listen to them. Their scientists are first class. I can tell you as a scientist that scientists from the industry that I've met are top quality, right? So I like that very much. The industry is there. MDs are there. Tobacco controllers are there. Researchers, toxicologists, consumers are there. And everybody's there. It's a huge cattle fair.
Excellent. I like your cattle fair analogy. That's excellent. Well, I'm very much looking forward to meeting you and exchanging information on cattle at GFN. Thank you very much, Roberto, for your time.
I forgot to wear my cowboy hat.
You did, yes. I shall expect you to have it in Warsaw.
Oh, yes. I'll come with my horse.
Excellent.
Shooting in the air. Bang, bang, bang.
Thank you very much for your time, Roberto. It's been a great interview. It's lovely to meet you. I look forward to meeting you properly in Warsaw. And don't forget that you can book your place at GFN. It's open now at gfn.net.co. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in Warsaw. Goodbye.